Hello friends, and welcome to another video. I'm Miley. Today we are talking all things Outlander, and I cannot freaking wait to dive into it with you guys because there's a lot. Okay, let's get started. So if you haven't seen my very first ranking and review of a book series video, I will link it right up here. I did the Bridgerton series, which I read in like 1.5 weeks because I was so obsessed with them. I like totally sped read through them all. Go check that video out if you haven't seen it already. But today I cannot wait to dive into Outlander because it is like, maybe, dare I say, it is my favorite book series. I love this series. It encompasses everything that I love to read. It's totally like historical fiction vibes. I love history. It's all kinds of romance. Who doesn't love a good romance? And then throw in some fun fantasy elements. I just like, it's everything I love in a series. So without further ado, let's get on into it, you guys. So first things first, I'm going to talk through kind of just an overview and my thoughts on every single one of the books, and then make sure to stick around to the end because I'll tell you my ranking. I would love to connect with you guys down below on what your ranking of the Outlander series is if you've read the books, and if you think my ranking is on par, if you think I got it totally wrong, comment down below. I want to hear all of your opinions. So without further ado, let's jump into the very first book, the classic Outlander. Okay, so we start Outlander by meeting the heroine of all heroines, Claire Beecham. She is a nurse in World War II. She and her husband are taking a second honeymoon in Scotland right after the war is finished as kind of a renewing of their marriage and celebration of not being separated for years and years and years because of the war. So through a crazy turn of events, she accidentally comes upon some sort of time-traveling circle magic, and she goes back to 18th century Scotland, where she is in immediate danger immediately, and meets a ragtag bunch of Scots that kind of shepherd her, but also kind of threaten her. I don't know. It's a little ambiguous at the beginning, but she meets Jamie Fraser, who, as we all know, is just the hero of all heroes in this tale. These two, of course, grow close, and as Claire is just desperately trying to figure out how to get back to the time-traveling stones so she can get back to her husband, she accidentally kind of falls in love with Jamie. They have to get married through crazy circumstances and basically are just always fighting to stay alive in the Scottish Highlands that are occupied by the British. And somehow in there, they fall madly, deeply in love with each other, and she actually makes the decision to stay with Jamie. Wow. So crazy, 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 crazy. And then of course the bad guy, Blackjack Randall, is like the worst ever and totally like has a crush on Jamie, but is like super creepy and horrible and does very, very bad things. And Claire has to rescue him at the end. So wow, there is just a lot that goes down in this first book. And what I love most about the first book is how stinking fast it moves without sacrificing character development. You feel like you truly get to know not just Claire and Jamie, but you get to know Blackjack Randall as the villain. You get to know freaking Dougal Mackenzie, Jamie's uncle. You get to know Galus Duncan. Like, there are so many amazing characters that you meet throughout this first story that play a really important role throughout the entire 8-book series, about to be 9. And it's just like so fun. It's such an immersive series. You really feel like it's a real world. It's got lots of depth. The characters are fantastic. And the story just like keeps you flying through it. I think I read Outlander in maybe 2 days. And that's a lot because it's like almost 1,000 pages. So love the first book. The perfect thing to suck you into the series. Totally sets it up without feeling like set up. It is just such a fantastic story. I definitely recommend, if you do not want to commit to a 8-book, over 1,000, sometimes 1,500 page series, then at least read Outlander. It is a fantastic standalone story. It has a great wrap up at the end and you will love it. It will be worth it. It goes so fast. It does not feel like you're reading 1,000 pages at all. So as you can tell, I love this one. But then next comes the second book, Dragonfly in Amber. So this is the story where Claire and Jamie, who Jamie now knows that Claire's from the future, they decide that they want to try and do everything they can to stop the Jacobite Rising. So they travel to France to try and make that happen. They meet Fergus, who's one of my very favorite characters in the whole series. And oh my gosh, you just fall in love with Fergus. He's just the cutest little boy and then grows up to be like the best man ever and just awesome. Jamie and Jack Black Randall meet up again. They duel. Claire has a baby, but then she miscarries the baby. Very sad. They're then banished from France and they return to Scotland. So then Jamie kills his uncle Dougal and the Battle of Culloden happens, and Jamie knows that he's going to die in the Battle of Culloden because what other choice does he have? He just killed his uncle. And they also know that Claire is pregnant again, and so he's like, Claire, no other choice, bish. I can't take care of you in this world anymore. You've got to go back to your own time. Your husband will take you back. Protect my child and go have a great life. They have the most gut-wrenching goodbye ever. He takes her to the stones. She goes through the stones. And then this book introduces my favorite part of the entire Outlander series, which is the dual timelines. You have many timelines happening at once. In this book, you only have 2, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. But it is so intricate, so interesting to follow. You're always jumping from timeline to timeline, and it is so exciting. So in the future/present of Claire's timeline, you then meet Brianna, her grown-up daughter, the daughter of Jamie and Claire. They meet Roger, who helps Claire investigate Jamie's fate. I don't love the France storyline of this book. It's kind of tedious to me and kind of feels like a lost cause. But like I mentioned before, this is where the multiple timeline element of the Outlander series is introduced, and it is just like blows your mind fantastic when it first happened. So definitely this one's worth the read for that alone. Okay, next up we have book number 3, Voyager. So if you thought a lot happened in Dragonfly and Amber, then oh my gosh, Voyager is like 3 books in one. So in Voyager, we learn about what happened in the aftermath of Culloden. With Jamie, we learn that he doesn't die, that instead he goes to Scotland and hides out in a cave for like 10 years and then eventually goes to Ardsmuir prison where he meets John Grey, and then he gets released from prison and he goes to the crazy people's house. I can't even remember their last name right now, where he accidentally gets their daughter pregnant and has an illegitimate son. All that happens in the 20 years that he goes without Claire when she's in her present day time. And Claire, meanwhile, in her present time, is deciding that she's going to go back and try to find Jamie. Brianna and Roger help her, and she goes back through the stones to find Jamie. She finds Jamie. That reunion scene is just like the best ever. It's very unexpected, not like the dramatic romantic reunion you would think. It's very character, like real life, what would happen. So they go back to Scotland, and Claire finds out that Jamie was actually married to Leary of all people from the first book, who was like an evil character. We do not like Leary. And raised her 2 girls like they were his own, Joan and Marsley. They discover that Leary needs payment because Claire's back and she feels wronged by the whole situation. So they decide that they're going to go off for the mysterious Jacobite gold, the lost gold, to fund the Jacobite rebellion that never was, to pay Leary. You know, that sounds like a good plan, right? So as they're almost searching for it and find it, young Ian then gets captured. Young Ian is Jamie's nephew, and taken away on this like seemingly pirate ship. And Claire and Jamie have to go after him. So they go after him, and Marsley and Fergus actually run away with them and get handfasted, which I love Marsley and I love her and Fergus's side story. It's so fun and cute and just like, ooh, I love them. But they have to go and search for young Ian, and they find him. Basically, Galis Duncan has him on this crazy island. Basically, in the end, Claire has to kill her. And as they're escaping on the boat, they get shipwrecked in America, of all places. I think Georgia. So that's kind of where Voyager leaves them. Shipwrecked in America. But they saved young Ian at least and killed Galis, who was psycho. So a lot happens in that book, to say the least. I love this one. Love it. I love it because in the present day timeline, you get the first taste of Brianna and Roger's relationship and their kind of flirty nature. I love them. I love Brianna. She's maybe my favorite character in all of the Outlander series. You get the Jamie and Claire reunion. You have Marsley and Fergus and their like young, sweet romance. You have the introduction of the Jacobite treasure, the jewels that become a big thing throughout the rest of the series. There's just so much that happens. It keeps you on your toes. The story's always changing, but it's not hard to follow, and it doesn't lack character development. I love the way this series does such a good job at introducing new characters and more story complications without skimming over others, the books just keep getting longer because you keep getting more storylines and more characters. But so you don't lose character development. These are great, well-rounded, layered, really complex and engaging characters. Each one that is introduced that's new, you just love, and you love following their story, and it just makes the world more intricate. It makes the world more complete. Oh, I just love Voyager. It's fantastic. Okay, so then we have the fourth one, Drums of Autumn, which I love this one too. You get Jamie and Claire kind of making their life in the Americas. You get Brianna and Roger's love story, which, oh, is just like my favorite thing to follow. I love their love story. We see that Bree and Roger discover that Jamie and Claire die in a fire, and Brianna decides to go back in time to warn them, and Roger follows her back in time. We have the introduction of what I think is the worst Outlander character, Stephen Bonnet, and you have the horrible assault scene with him and Bree. You have Roger trying to make his way back to Bree and find them in the Americas, but getting kidnapped by a tribe in the meantime. You meet Aunt Jocasta. Bree has Jemmy, her son, which who knows if it's Stephen Bonnet's son or Roger's son. It's just such a good character-driven story. And this book is just so fantastically woven together. I love it because you have really great small relationship moments like Jamie and Claire getting settled in at River Run, and Bree getting to meet her real father and kind of develop a relationship with him for the first time, even get to meet him at all. This one is just a little less action and a little more character development, and I just think it is such a good one. Definitely worth the read on this one. Okay, so then we've got book 5, The Fiery Cross. Roger and Bree get married in this book. The governor that kind of oversees the area that Jamie has told to build land on and start a homestead, he orders Jamie to start an army to fight with the British against the colonies. And Jamie and Claire, of course, know that that's not going to work out in their favor because America wins. You also find out that Stephen Bonnet knows a lot more about the hidden jewels than you think he does, and he might be after them as well. Not to mention he's also after Bree's son, which he thinks is his son, but that's not confirmed yet or denied. You have the Battle of Almanac, where Roger goes to the wrong place at the wrong time and ends up hung and almost dies, but his vocal cords are destroyed essentially, and he goes into a deep, dark depression. Young Ian returns from the tribe that he had to, in the last book, basically switch places with Roger so Roger could come home. And you get the decision of Roger and Bree to stay and live their life in the Americas with their family in the 18th century and not go back to their own time. So this book gets a little bit tedious. It's pretty slow, I would say. You do get some really great storylines of settlers on Fraser's Ridge. I don't love the whole Battle of Almanac and Roger's hanging. That just feels like almost like we need to get some real history in here. So how can we make this interesting and put a twist on it? It kind of feels separate from the rest of the story, almost like doesn't really lend itself to the greater overarching story at all. It's just kind of a complication that Roger has to face and deal with. I'm not a big fan of that plot. It's not my favorite one, although the scene with the Fiery Cross where Jamie lights it at the top of Fraser's Ridge and basically calls his new clan that's made up of the residents of Fraser's Ridge to come and join his militia. That's a really fun, kind of poignant scene in the book that I really enjoyed. So next we have A Breath of Snow and Ashes. And I love this one too. This one happens really close to the American Revolution, and you kind of feel the conflict, the political rising, and Jamie and Claire are kind of torn between keeping Fraser's Ridge and, you know, following all the rules that the governor has set, even though it's on the British losing side, and being torn toward the American Revolution side. In this one, Claire gets kidnapped and is stuck with kind of a band of horrible travelers through a good chunk of the book. She actually meets another time traveler who is part of this group, just kind of trying to survive. Goes through a lot when she's kidnapped and has to survive a lot of really horrific things. Jamie and the rest of her family, of course, rescue her, and the scene where he like slaughters every single person that kidnapped Claire. Oh, I don't condone murder, of course, but it was such a satisfying scene. So So satisfying. Claire then gets dysentery and almost dies. Jamie has to nurse her back to health for once. We meet some new residents of the Ridge. We meet the Bugs, so the older husband and wife who kind of help Jamie and Claire around the house. We meet, of course, we already met Lizzie, but we meet Kezzy and Josiah, who develop a weird thing with Lizzie. We have the Christie family drama. Roger becomes a minister. Marsley gives birth to their like fourth kid. Stephen Bonnet kidnaps Bree and takes her to his weird island and tries to sell her into slavery. And Jamie and Roger rescue her, thankfully. Bree and Roger have their second child, a daughter who has a heart condition that they only know about because Claire is able to detect it. And they decide that they're going to have to go back through the stones to help their daughter Mandy get the medical care she needs to survive, because if they stayed in the 18th century, she would die. So they decide they have to go back. So this one is maybe my favorite, maybe. Not sure yet. Stick around for the end where I will definitively decide my ranking. But I love the entire story of Claire's kidnapping and how Jamie avenges her, because it's so incredibly like satisfying, because Claire totally stays super tough and strong, and she tells the kidnappers at every turn that her husband is going to kill all of them, that it's just a matter of time before he finds them, and they laugh at her and they make fun of her, and she stays strong and she fights against them as much as she can. And then Jamie finds her and he totally comes through on her promise to them that he will kill every single one of them. And it's really bloody and it's really intense, but it's also extremely awesome. And I love finally getting rid of Stephen Bonnet. Like, oh my gosh, finally saying goodbye to him. He's like the worst villain ever. I mean, because he's an awesome villain, but he's the worst. You hate him so much. You're so glad that he finally gets what's coming to him. And man, saying goodbye to him was also so satisfying. So I love this one. It's so stinking good. Okay, and then these last two kind of run together for me, but we'll start with number 7, An Echo in the Bone. That one is a hilarious title, I think. So we meet Bree and Roger at Lallybroch, but in present day. They've like totally restored the house and live in it. I love that detail. They can communicate a little bit with Jamie and Claire in the past because of a complicated letter system that they created. So through those letters, we find out that Jem knows of a hiding place of some hidden gold because Jamie told him. He's the only one that knows. And for some reason, this random guy named Rob Cameron, who works with Bree, kidnaps Jem and knows that he knows where the gold is and tries to get him to tell him where the gold is. He apparently knows about the time traveling. He wants information on that. Like, he's this real weird, freaky character that just comes out of nowhere. So Roger and Bree think that Rob Cameron takes Jem back in time. So Roger goes back in time to find him while Bree stays with Mandy trying to solve the mystery in present day. We then, in a totally different story, meet Willie, Jamie's illegitimate child who's all grown up and is apparently a redcoat. Ian, back at the Ridge, accidentally shoots Mrs. Bug and kills her, and Mr. Bug swears revenge on him. Jamie and Claire and Ian try to go back to Scotland, but they can't right away because of the Revolutionary War, but they meet Rachel, who might be my very favorite Outlander character. I love Rachel so much. She's a Quaker and she's just so like, oh, I just love her. She's so good, but very firm in her beliefs and stands up for what's right and is just so kind and goes out of her way to help people, but just like super sturdy, like not meek, not, you know, a weak woman that hangs in the background. Like, that's not her at all. She's freaking a rock star. We also get Rachel and Ian's love story, which I just love it so much. I love them so much. He loves her so much. His dog Rolo loves her so much. I just love their love story. It's so good. Willie finds out that Jamie's his real dad. Man, there's just like a lot going on in this one. It's kind of, this plot is kind of hard to follow. I'm not gonna lie. This is the only book where I was like, there is so much going on right now. I don't love the Bree and Roger storyline of like him going back in time, her having to hold down the fort at home while freaking the Cameron guy is crazy. He's a villain that seems to pop up out of nowhere. We get a little more explanation about his background in the next book, so it's a little less random then, but at this point in the story, it's like, where did this come from? What is this new element we're reading about? I don't understand. But what I do love about this book, and why it goes up in ranking for me, I guess, is because of Rachel and Ian. Their storyline is the best part of that whole book, and anytime I had a chapter about either one of them, I was like, yes, this is awesome. They're the best part of this book for sure. Okay, and then last we have Written in My Own Heart's Blood, which is the most ridiculous title out of all of the Outlander books. And that's a hard title to win because most of them are ridiculous. But this one we see Ian and Rachel get married, and I love it so much. They go into battle. Claire gets wounded in battle, so Jamie has to resign from the militia, thankfully. They go back to Fraser's Ridge. Fergus and Marsley take over the printing shop, and I think their son dies because the printing shop burns. Very sad. Roger's still back in time, and he meets Jamie's father. He meets his own father, I think, right? I can't remember. It's all a little hazy up here. Bree actually finds out that Jemmy is not in the past, like they both thought, which was why Roger went to the past in the first place. He's actually still in present day, and she saves him. They kind of thwart the Cameron dude, who is apparently part of this larger organization that's found out about the time traveling mystery, and they kind of track the time travelers and want to, I don't know, do bad things to them. It's still unclear. I'm interested for the next book to find out more about them, but thankfully Roger comes back, and in order to get away from these crazy people, they escape back into the 18th century with their kids. It's really good. Like I said, the last two, they totally flow together timeline and story plot wise. So I'm a little hazy on where one ends and the other begins, but they're a great story. But really, I'm just super ready for the next one. It comes out in November, and it's got a really funny title too. It's called like, Go Tell the Bees Why I'm Gone, or I don't know, something like that. It's already pre-ordered. It will be here on November 5th, I think, and I cannot wait. So now that we've talked through all of the books and why reading all of them is great, the fun little bits from each one, if you could follow any of the complex snippets I gave you, it's definitely a series you should read, 100%. It is a commitment. It probably took me 6 months to read all of these books because they range from about 900 pages to sometimes like 1700 pages. But it doesn't feel like you're reading crazy long, huge books. Like, the stories travel really fast. The characters are awesome. It's just really interesting, really intriguing. I love it so much. You should read it. So before we finish, I want to give you my ranking of each of the books, and let's just jump right in. Start at the very bottom. My least favorite Outlander book is Dragonfly and Amber. It's the second one. It's just a lot. It's not my fave. You got to read it to get through it, but I don't like it. Next one is Fiery Cross, the fifth one. Not a lot happens in this. It's really tedious, and it's just not the best. Number 6 would be Drums of Autumn. I do like Drums of Autumn, don't get me wrong, but it's just not as exciting as all the rest of them. Number 5 would be Written in My Own Heart's Blood, and followed very closely by number 4, Echo in the Bone. Those last two, like I said, totally run together, but they're great. You get some new characters, you get new developments, like Willie's storyline, of course, Rachel and Ian, who I love. So they're up there, kind of middle ground for me. And then top 3. These are my fave 3s. Number 3 is the third book, Voyager. I love Voyager because you get those complex timelines. You get a really like complex story. You meet some new characters. It's just a great, great, great book, especially reading it after Dragonfly and Amber, which is kind of a dud. Voyager just like reignites your love for the Outlander series. And then number 2 is, of course, the first one, Outlander. It's a classic. You cannot go wrong with it. I absolutely love it. But my number 1 very favorite does inch it out by just a little bit. My number 1 favorite is A Breath of Snow and Ashes. I just love this one. It's like the perfect conglomeration of everything Outlander in a beautiful packaged present that tied with a nice bow. Like, I just love that one. It's my very favorite, and I recommend you read it, and I recommend you read this whole series because you will fall in love with it. It is fantastic. So definitely let me know down below what your ranking is if you have read all of the Outlander series. Let me know your pros and cons. Let me know what you like, don't like, who your favorite characters are. Me, I really can't decide between Rachel, Bree, and Claire. I love Claire too. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to comment down below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!